Okay, deep divers, let's jump straight in. Today we are tackling one of the most common hurdles people face when speaking English, or honestly any new language. It's that moment when the conversation just stalls. You know the feeling, you're talking, things are going okay, and then silence. You just don't know what to say next. Or maybe you give a really short answer and the other person doesn't know what to do either. It can feel awkward,
Yeah.
frustrating, like you've hit a wall.
It really can, and it's a completely natural part of conversation, even for native speakers sometimes, but that wall feeling is definitely, well, amplified when you're working in a language that isn't your first.
Yeah.
There's that extra cognitive load, that pressure to be fluent, and when the flow breaks, it can feel like a much bigger failure than it actually is. But you're absolutely right. This is something everyone can improve with some practical techniques.
Exactly. And that's the core of our deep dive today. We've got some fantastic source material that really gets into the nuts and bolts of this. It offers simple, actionable strategies to keep the conversation ball rolling. We're going to look at asking questions that invite more than just a one-word answer, how to make your own responses richer, using those little glue words that make native speakers sound, well, natural, and even how to change the subject smoothly when you need to.
And critically, I think we'll also spend a good amount of time exploring the cultural layers beneath English conversation.
Oh.
Things like the role of small talk, the power of sharing stories, and the importance of active listening. These aren't just grammar points, right?
Right.
They're fundamental social tools in English-speaking contexts. And understanding them is just key to feeling confident and, comfortable.
So, buckle up. By the end of this deep dive, those awkward pauses should feel a lot less intimidating. You'll have a toolkit ready to deploy, making you feel more prepared, more confident, and genuinely able to participate more fully in English conversations. Our mission: unlock the flow. Let's unpack this.
Let's do it. Sounds good.
So, based on our source material, where does this conversation breakdown often start? Like, what's the initial tripwire?
Well, the source identifies a primary culprit right there at the questioning stage. It seems the biggest mistake people make is asking questions that the other person can answer with just a simple yes or no.
Oh, okay.
The source actually calls these dead-end questions, and I think that's a really apt description.
Dead-end questions. Yeah, I can picture them immediately. Like, do you have a good weekend? Or are you enjoying this deep dive?
Exactly those kinds. A perfectly polite person can answer yes or no to those questions, and, technically they've answered completely, but then...
Right. Then silence.
Yeah. The conversation suddenly relies totally on the asker immediately coming up with another question, often just out of thin air. Because there was no information in the yes or no to build upon, it just kills the momentum instantly.
It feels like the conversational equivalent of hitting a brick wall at full speed. Just bam, stop.
Totally. So how do we dismantle that wall? What does the source suggest?
Well, the core technique the source proposes is pretty straightforward, shifting away from those yes-no structures. Instead, favoring questions that start with words like what, how, or why.
Precisely. These question words, they inherently demand a more detailed response. They're asking for information or a process or a reason rather than just confirmation or denial.
Okay, that makes sense.
The source provides a really clear comparison using the example of asking about music. If you ask, do you like music, what's the most common answer?
Yeah.
Yes. Conversation over, or at least paused awkwardly.
Okay, yeah, that's the dead end we definitely want to avoid. So what's the suggested alternative using that what the why approach?
Instead, you ask something like, what kind of music do you like? See the difference. Now, the person has to give you more detail. They can't just say yes.
Right.
They might respond, I listen to a lot of rock, especially classic rock. My favorite band has always been Queen.
Okay, now we have something to work with. Suddenly, from just that one sentence, you've got multiple potential directions, right? You could ask about classic rock in general, or Queen specifically, maybe their favorite Queen song, or if they've seen them live.
Exactly. The key is that the answer itself generates new lines of inquiry. The information they give you, classic rock, Queen, provides the material for your next question. It's like they've handed you conversational threads. And as the source illustrates, once they say, my favorite band is Queen, your follow-up could easily be, oh, interesting, why do you like Queen so much?
And asking why takes it even deeper, doesn't it? It gets into their personal connection to the music, maybe memories associated with the band, or what they appreciate about their sound or their lyrics.
Yeah.
You've gone from a simple yes-no possibility to actually exploring personal taste, history, preference, all sparked by that initial what question.
It's a fundamental shift in approach. You're essentially opening a door, not just asking if there is a door. By using what, how, or why, you're prompting the other person's brain to access and share more complex information descriptions, processes, reasons, maybe even sequences of events.
Yeah.
This is just much richer conversational fodder than a simple binary yes or no. Think about asking, how did you learn English? Versus, did you learn English?
A big difference.
Huge difference. The how question immediately asks for a story, a process, maybe challenges, effort. It's inherently more interesting and invites a much more detailed response than just, yes, I did.
So it's not just about getting more words out of the person. It's about getting meaningful words, words that reveal something and give you those threads to follow.
That's the core of it.
So step one, ask questions that actually invite a real answer, open-ended questions.
Absolutely. It puts the fuel in the conversational engine right from the start.
Okay, great. So you've asked a brilliant what question. The other person is giving you a great detailed response. But the conversation can still die if your reply back is too short.
Right.
This brings us to the second common stumbling block the source identifies, giving very brief answers when you are the one responding.
Right. It's the flip side of the coin. You can be on the receiving end of a perfect open-ended question like, what kind of movies do you enjoy? But if you just answer with, say, action movies, you're essentially handing back an empty box.
Yeah.
The person who asked is left thinking, okay, action movies, now what? They still have nowhere to go. The source uses the example of someone asking, do you like traveling?
And the conversation stopping answer would just be yes or maybe no, full stop.
Exactly, that's it. The asker thinks, okay, they like traveling. What do I ask now? Where? Why? Who with? They have no hook, no specifics to grab onto.
So the source's advice here is simple but really effective, it seems. What is the core technique for giving better answers?
The rule of thumb is, when you answer, always try to add at least one extra piece of information. Or, even better sometimes, include a follow-up question directed back at the other person.
Okay, so add info or ask back.
Yes. Let's look at that traveling example again. Instead of just yes, the source suggests an answer more like this. Yes, I love traveling. Actually, last year I went to Thailand and it was amazing. Have you ever been there?
Okay, let's dissect that answer because it does so much heavy lifting in keeping the conversation alive. It's doing multiple things.
It truly does. First, it directly answers the question, yes, I love traveling. Check. That's the required response.
Got it.
But then it immediately adds context and specific detail. Last year, I went to Thailand and it was amazing. This is crucial. Thailand is a specific place the other person might know or have an opinion on or be curious about. Amazing is an emotional descriptor that naturally invites a question like, oh, why was it amazing? Or really, what did you do there? You've provided hooks.
Right. Specificity is key there. Thailand, last year, amazing. Concrete things.
Exactly. And then importantly, you don't just leave it there and wait for them to hopefully find a hook. You actively throw the ball back with a question. Have you ever been there?
Ah, okay. So you're making it easy for them.
Precisely. You've given them information to react to, and you've given them a specific question to answer. You've made it incredibly easy for the conversation to continue. They can react to the Thailand part, they could ask about your amazing experience, or they can directly answer whether they have been to Thailand. Suddenly, the possibilities for the next turn in the conversation just exploded compared to that single word yes. It's like you're not just returning the serve in tennis, you're like returning it with some spin, setting it up nicely so it's easier for them to return it back to you. Your answer isn't the end of your turn, it's the setup for the next turn.
That's a great analogy. You're taking responsibility for contributing to the flow, for keeping the rally going.
Yeah. Now, this doesn't mean you need to give a monologue every single time you answer. The source isn't suggesting you deliver a 5-minute speech. It's about adding just enough extra information, maybe 1 or 2 specific details, or that crucial follow-up question to provide a clear path forward for the other person.
So maybe just practice adding because and then giving one brief reason. Or last week and mentioning one quick action related to the topic.
Exactly. Small additions. It's about training yourself to think, okay, I've answered. What's one extra little thing I can add? Or how can I loop them back in?
It might feel a bit conscious or effortful at first, I imagine, but the source implies it becomes more natural with practice. And the reward is huge, avoiding that dreaded awkward silence.
Absolutely. And it makes the whole exchange feel much more dynamic and less like an interview or an interrogation.
Right, more like a real conversation.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're asking better questions, we're giving answers with more substance, and maybe a follow-up question. Now let's talk about something that truly distinguishes natural, fluent speakers. The use of those small words and phrases that aren't strictly necessary for grammar, maybe, but they make everything flow so much more smoothly. Our source refers to these as filler phrases, but in a good way.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. These fillers, or maybe conversational lubricants, are absolutely integral to sounding natural. Native speakers use them constantly, often without even thinking about it.
Mm.
They fill tiny pauses while we think, they signal hesitation or confirmation, they soften direct responses. As the source points out, a blunt single word yes or no is actually far less common in natural everyday speech than you might think.
Okay, so give us some examples from the source for those common responses. What do people often say instead of just a plain yes?
Well, instead of just yes, you'll very frequently hear yeah, which is just a more casual version.
Mm-hmm.
Or to show stronger agreement or confirmation, you get phrases like yeah, definitely, or absolutely, or for sure.
Okay.
You might also hear things like right or exactly used not just for agreeing on a fact, but often as a way to confirm understanding while someone is talking or to kind of encourage the speaker to continue, like, right.
And what about for no? Because just saying no can sometimes feel quite abrupt or even a bit negative in English, can it?
It really can. The source suggests alternatives like not really, which is a much softer way to express disagreement or give a negative answer.
Not really. That's useful.
Yeah, and often this is paired with something else to kind of mitigate the negativity or keep the topic open, like, not really, but I'd love to try it someday. Which ties back perfectly to our previous point about adding information or possibility, right?
Yeah, it does. Keeps the door open.
Or even just, no, I don't think so, sounds softer than a flat no.
I really like that. Not really, but structure. It's like a mini transition in itself. It acknowledges the no, but immediately offers something else. What about when you genuinely don't have the answer? The source gives a great alternative to just saying, I don't know.
Right, because just saying, I don't know, can sometimes sound a bit dismissive or like you're not interested, even if you don't mean it that way at all.
Yeah, I can see that.
So the source suggests phrases that buy you a little time, show you're actually thinking about it, and importantly, indicate engagement. A great example is, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about it.
Oh, that phrase does so much work. It's polite. It acknowledges the quality of the question. That's a good question. Shows you're considering it. Haven't really thought about it. And it softens the admission of not knowing. It feels collaborative rather than like you're just shutting down the inquiry.
Exactly. It signals that you're engaged in the topic, even if you don't have the specific piece of information they ask for. The source also mentions some more general filler phrases that just pop up everywhere in spoken English. Things like, well, actually, sometimes like, and so.
Well, and so seem like common ways to start a sentence or transition slightly.
Very common. Well, actually, it's interesting, too. It often introduces a slight correction or maybe a more nuanced perspective than expected, right? Like, did you finish the report? Well, actually, I finished the draft. I just need to do one final read-through.
Okay. It prepares the listener for something slightly different.
Yes. And, is pervasive. Sometimes it's genuinely checking for shared understanding, like, it was that new cafe, the one near the park. But often it's more of just a pause for thought or simply part of someone's natural speech rhythm.
And that gets used a lot too.
It does, sometimes maybe overused by some speakers, but it's often used naturally to introduce an example or an approximation or even reported speech or thought, like, it was like 5 miles away. Or she's like, no way.
Got it. So the source seems to be saying these aren't necessarily errors to be eliminated, but actually tools to be used effectively.
That's the idea. They make your speech sound much more fluid, less choppy, and less like you're translating each sentence word for word in your head before you say it.
Right.
They fill those tiny silences that occur naturally as you formulate your next thought, preventing awkward gaps and making the whole conversation feel more effortless, more rhythmic. Think of it like adding oil to a machine. The parts just move much more smoothly. They give you that split second to think while still making a sound that signals you're still engaged and about to continue.
It's less about perfect, rigid grammar and more about achieving that continuous natural sound. Mastering just a few of these, used appropriately, could instantly make you sound more comfortable and fluent.
Precisely. Maybe just start with one or two that feel comfortable for you. Try to sprinkle them into your responses naturally. You'll probably feel a difference in the flow quite quickly.
Okay, so we're asking open questions, giving detailed answers, smoothing things out with fillers. But sometimes, even with the best techniques, a topic just, well, reaches its natural conclusion. Or maybe you realize you need to bring up something entirely different. That's where mastering smooth topic transitions comes in, as highlighted by our source.
Right, because just suddenly changing the subject can feel really jarring, can it? It can make the conversation feel awkward or disjointed. The goal is to bridge the gap between the old topic and the new one gracefully. And the source provides some excellent phrases specifically for this purpose.
Okay, let's run through them. The first one suggested is, that reminds me. How does that work as a bridge?
This phrase is perfect when something in the current conversation, maybe even just a small detail or an idea that was mentioned, triggers a related thought in your mind that leads to a new topic you want to introduce. You use "that reminds me" to explicitly state that connection, making the transition logical for the listener, even if the link is mostly just in your own head.
Oh, okay.
The source gives a great example. If you're talking about, say, travel, maybe someone mentions packing suitcases or dealing with jet lag, and you could say, "Oh, that reminds me, have you ever been to Japan?"
Got it. So the previous mention of travel, however specific or brief, serves as the anchor. That reminds me. Signals that your brain made a little leap, and now you're bringing the listener along to the result of that leap, this new topic about Japan. It feels connected, not totally random.
Exactly. It shows your thought process, which makes the shift feel natural. Slightly different phrase, perhaps for a more direct connection, is "speaking of that."
Speaking of that, how is that one used, and how is it maybe different from that reminds me?
Speaking of that, is often used to pick up on a specific word or phrase or maybe the main theme that was just mentioned and use it to segue into a related point or question. It usually implies a slightly closer or more obvious connection than "that reminds me."
Okay.
So if the whole conversation has been generally about different travel experiences people have had, you could use the source's example. "Speaking of travel, do you have a dream destination?" Here, travel was the clear ongoing theme, and you're using that phrase to narrow down or shift focus to a specific aspect of that established theme.
So speaking of that,
Mm.
is good for staying within the same general topic area, but maybe shifting to a different angle or a related subtopic. It feels like drilling down or pivoting slightly within the theme.
Yes, exactly. You're leveraging the established topic to introduce a new but clearly connected element. Now, the third phrase the source offers is perhaps the most versatile, especially for introducing a completely new, maybe even unrelated topic. "Oh, by the way."
Oh, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely feels like a gentler way to change the subject entirely, doesn't it?
It really is. It signals that what you're about to say is a bit of a tangent, or perhaps something you just remembered you wanted to mention, but you're doing it now. It's a softer way of introducing something that might not have a direct logical link to the immediately preceding sentence.
Right.
The source example is, "Oh, by the way, did you see the news today?" Unless you were literally just discussing current events, this uses "oh, by the way" to signal, "Okay, we were talking about X, but now I want to gently shift gears and ask you about Y."
It acknowledges the shift rather than just making it abruptly.
Right.
It feels more considerate of the listener, like you're flagging the change.
Absolutely. These transition phrases are like verbal signposts, really. They guide the listener smoothly from one idea to the next without making them feel lost or like the conversation is just jumping around randomly. Practicing them can make your conversation feel much more polished and easy to follow. Maybe try using one deliberately in your next conversation, perhaps. "That reminds me," when something genuinely triggers a related memory or idea.
Okay, fantastic. So we've armed ourselves with these sort of mechanical tools, asking, answering, using fillers, managing transitions. But the source makes a really critical point next, that truly keeping a conversation going naturally in English isn't just about these techniques. It's also deeply rooted in understanding the cultural context of communication in many English-speaking environments.
Yes, this is such a massive piece of the puzzle and often overlooked, I think. Conversation norms can vary significantly across cultures. What feels polite or interesting, or even what topics are appropriate to talk about, can be very, very different.
Right.
And the source emphasizes that in places like the US and the UK, a huge, pervasive part of daily interaction is something often underestimated or even disliked by learners: small talk.
Small talk. It can feel, well, small,
Mm-hmm.
maybe insignificant, even pointless sometimes. But the source really highlights its importance, calling it a huge, part of daily interactions.
It truly is the social glue in many situations. Small talk isn't usually about conveying deep, meaningful information. Its primary purpose is often about establishing connection, showing friendliness, building rapport, and just making people feel comfortable with each other.
Okay.
It's a kind of low-stakes way to interact and maintain social relationships, whether they're brief encounters or ongoing ones. It smooths introductions, it fills potentially awkward silences, and it can serve as a gentle warm-up before potentially moving into more substantial topics.
And where does this small talk typically happen, according to the source? Is it just reserved for parties or networking events?
Oh no, it's far more widespread than that. The source mentions you encounter it pretty much everywhere.
Hmm.
Definitely at work with colleagues, in cafes, ordering coffee, in shops while waiting in line, sometimes even in elevators at the gym. It's those brief, polite exchanges you might have with colleagues you don't know well, service staff, or even complete strangers momentarily sharing the same space. Think of the quick chat you might have with the barista while they make your coffee, or a quick word with a colleague you pass in the hallway or see in the break room.
And what are the safe sort of go-to topics for this kind of small talk? Because you can't just dive into anything, right? There are unwritten rules.
Exactly. The source points out that the key is generally to stick to neutral, universally relatable topics. The absolute classics in the US and UK include the weather, that's a perennially safe topic.
Can't go wrong with the weather.
Almost never. Also, popular TV shows or movies, general plans for the upcoming weekend, got any fun plans? Or maybe sports, if you have some reason to think the other person might be interested. Current, but crucially not controversial, local events can also work sometimes.
So simple things like, it's been unbelievably hot this week, hasn't it? Or, did you happen to catch the latest episode of popular show name? Or just, looking forward to the weekend. Got anything fun planned? These are pretty perfect small talk starters or responses.
They really are. They're easy to answer, they require no deep prior knowledge of the other person, and they offer clear opportunities for a brief reciprocal comment or question back like, oh yes, this heat is killing me, I suppose I'll just stay inside with the AC, or, oh, I don't watch that one, but I've heard it's really good, what's it about? They serve their purpose beautifully, a brief, friendly, low-pressure connection.
But, and this seems really important, the source gives a very strong warning about topics to avoid in small talk. This is critical cultural information.
Absolutely vital. In many English-speaking cultures, particularly North America and the UK, certain topics are generally considered too personal, too private, or too likely to cause disagreement or discomfort to bring up in casual small talk, especially with people you don't know well. The source specifically lists 3 big ones: money, religion, and politics.
Right, so you wouldn't typically ask a new colleague how much money they make, or their salary range.
Definitely not.
Or ask someone you just met in line at the grocery store about their political views or their specific religious beliefs.
Precisely. These topics can be deeply personal, highly sensitive, and often quite emotionally charged. Discussing them usually requires a level of trust and established rapport that simply doesn't exist in those typical small talk scenarios. Sticking to the general, lighter topics ensures the interaction remains comfortable, friendly, and, importantly, low conflict. It's about creating a positive, albeit potentially brief, connection, not starting a debate or making someone uncomfortable.
Okay, that's a really crucial distinction. Small talk, light, neutral, safe.
Yeah.
Got it. So small talk is the bread and butter of those brief interactions. What's another significant cultural element the source emphasizes for making maybe longer conversations more engaging and natural?
Storytelling. The source highlights a strong cultural inclination in many Western countries, like the US, Canada, UK, Australia, towards sharing personal experiences and anecdotes within conversation. It's often not just about conveying bare facts, it's about entertaining, connecting on a more human level, and making your points more relatable and memorable through narrative.
So it's about turning your experiences, even mundane ones sometimes, into mini narratives within the conversation, not just reporting data.
Exactly. Instead of just stating a fact or giving a very minimal answer, you kind of weave a little story around it. The source provides an excellent illustration of this using that common everyday question, how was your weekend? The simple, unengaging answer we discussed earlier is just,
It was good.
it was good. End of story. Quite
Yeah.
literally. Conversation stalls.
Right. And the storytelling approach suggested by the source is much more detailed and, well, engaging.
Yes. Instead of just, it was good, The source suggests you might say something more like this. Oh, it was great. Thanks for asking. Actually, I went hiking on Saturday with a few friends and we totally stumbled upon this amazing hidden waterfall we didn't even know was there. That was really cool. Then Sunday, I tried making homemade pizza from scratch for the first time and I completely burned it black. It was a total disaster. Haha. How about yours? Did you get up to anything interesting?
Wow, what a difference. That paints a picture. Let's break down why that answer works so much better for keeping the conversation flowing, according to the source.
Well, first, it provides much richer content, right? You've shared two distinct mini stories, one positive adventure, finding the waterfall, and one relatable, slightly humorous mishap, burning the pizza. These are specific events with inherent interest, much more than just good.
And crucially, each of those specific details, the hiking, the waterfall, the homemade pizza disaster, give the other person something concrete to react to or ask about.
Precisely. As the source notes, the listener now has multiple potential entry points for their response. They could react to the hiking part. Oh, wow, a hidden waterfall sounds incredible. Whereabouts was that? Or maybe they connect more with the cooking mishap. Haha, oh no, homemade pizza gone wrong.
I've definitely had my share of cooking disasters, too. I once set off the smoke alarm just making toast.
Haha, yeah. So each reaction uses your story as a springboard for their own comment or a question or maybe even a related experience of their own.
Exactly. So storytelling in this context isn't just about talking about yourself endlessly. It's about offering these little pieces of your experience, often framed as mini stories, that are designed to resonate with the listener and provide clear hooks for their response. It transforms a simple question and answer exchange into a more shared, evolving narrative space. It just makes the conversation much more vibrant, personal, and frankly more fun.
It feels much more natural and probably creates stronger connections than just exchanging factual summaries like, I went hiking, I cooked. Absolutely. So practice turning some of your simple answers into short anecdotes, even for work things, instead of just, my meeting was long, maybe try, that meeting was so long, we went over by half an hour, and then my computer decided to restart right when I was trying to save my notes. Adds a bit of drama, a bit of relatability.
Good tip. Okay, so
Oh.
we have small talk for brief interactions, storytelling for richer ones. The final cultural element, the source points out, is really crucial, and it happens while the other person is speaking. Active listening.
Yes, this is incredibly important in English-speaking communication norms. The source notes that while in some cultures, showing respect while someone is speaking might involve being very quiet and still, maybe avoiding eye contact, in many English-speaking contexts, it's often expected that you provide fairly regular verbal and nonverbal signals to show you are following along, engaged, and understanding.
So just listening silently, even if you're paying absolute perfect attention inside your head, might actually be misinterpreted, maybe as disinterest or confusion or like you're not following.
It absolutely can be, unfortunately. Without those expected signals, the little listening noises and the accompanying body language, the speaker might feel like they're talking into a void. They don't get the feedback they subconsciously expect to know you're tracking with them. Active listening provides that crucial feedback loop.
Okay, so what are some of the key verbal cues, the source lists? Those little sounds or short phrases you make while someone is in the middle of their turn talking.
These are sounds and short phrases you'll hear constantly, peppered throughout native English conversations. Very common ones are simple acknowledgments like, uh-huh, yeah, right, okay, gotcha, I see. Then for showing a bit more reaction, you have phrases like, oh, really? Wow. No way, which can be used for surprise, either positive or negative. That's interesting, that sounds amazing. Or maybe, oh no, if they're sharing something difficult.
So, uh-huh and mm-hmm are just like simple acknowledgments. Yep, I'm hearing you, keep going, right? Or I see can mean I understand, or maybe I agree with that point. And those reaction phrases like, wow, or no way, show you're having an actual emotional or cognitive response to what they're saying.
Exactly. They are small verbal interjections. They don't usually interrupt the speaker's flow, but they crucially show you're not just passively receiving the sound waves, but actively processing and reacting to the content. They fill minimal space and actually encourage the speaker to continue, making them feel heard and validated.
Huh.
The source suggests really consciously practicing adding these in, maybe deliberately try to use, oh, really, or that's interesting the next time someone tells you something new or surprising in conversation.
And it's not just verbal cues, right? The source mentions body language is also a key part of active listening in this context.
Yes, absolutely. The source emphasizes the importance of nonverbal cues too. These include things like nodding your head gently while someone is speaking, which shows agreement or understanding. Maintaining appropriate eye contact, not staring intensely, but regularly meeting their gaze. And sometimes, slightly leaning forward can show you're particularly attentive or interested in what they're saying.
So these physical actions work together with the verbal sounds to reinforce the message of engagement.
Definitely. They demonstrate your focus and attentiveness non-verbally. So active listening, as the source presents it, is really this combination of these small verbal sounds and phrases, plus intentional body language like nodding and eye contact, all working together synergistically to signal to the speaker, constantly and subtly, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm following, and I'm engaged with what you're saying.
Right. It's like providing a running commentary of your listening process.
In a way, yes. It's a constant, subtle stream of feedback. And practicing these cues, even starting with simple things like just remembering to nod occasionally and say, or yeah, will not only make you feel more comfortable participating, but it will also make the person you're talking to feel more at ease and more encouraged to share more, which in turn provides more opportunities for you to practice all the other techniques we've discussed, like asking follow-up questions or sharing your own related stories. It becomes a kind of virtuous cycle.
That makes a lot of sense. Wow, this has been a really packed deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, moving from those fundamental mechanics of asking good questions and giving better answers, all the way through to the more nuanced social choreography of using fillers, transitioning topics, understanding small talk, leveraging storytelling, and actively showing you're listening.
It's definitely a lot to take in.
It is. But our source helpfully boils much of this down into a clear, simple challenge for you, the listener, to actually put these ideas into practice right away.
Yeah, it breaks it down into 3 very manageable steps that you could try today, or maybe in your next English conversation.
Okay, what's step 1?
Step 1. Just choose a simple, safe conversation topic. The source suggests things we discussed earlier, like music or travel, hobbies, maybe even just weekend plans. Pick one that feels comfortable and easy for you to talk about.
All right, step 2.
Step 2. Focus specifically on asking open-ended questions about that chosen topic. Consciously try to use the what, how, or why structure. Maybe even mentally prepare 2 or 3 potential open-ended questions before you even start talking to someone. So instead of do you play sports, you could try planning to ask, what sports do you enjoy playing? Or which ones do you like to follow?
Good example. Or instead of just, did you travel last year? Maybe you plan to ask, where did you travel last year, if you don't mind me asking? And what was that like?
Exactly. Framing it open-endedly.
Yeah.
And step 3. Step 3. In a conversation, just try to deliberately use 1 or 2 of the filler phrases or active listening cues we talked about. Just pick 1 or 2. Maybe practice adding and nodding occasionally while someone else is speaking, or consciously use that's interesting as a response when appropriate. Or perhaps swap a simple yes for yeah, definitely when you strongly agree with something.
These steps are designed to be really small and achievable. The source isn't saying you have to suddenly master everything all at once. That would be overwhelming. Just pick one area, maybe asking better questions, and focus on practicing just that for a little while. Then, once that feels a bit more comfortable, maybe add another layer, like working on adding more detail to your own answers.
Absolutely. The key really seems to be conscious practice. And as you go out and try these things, the source leaves us with an incredibly important and I think encouraging message to remember throughout the process.
Yes, it's a really powerful perspective shift, I think. The main point is, English conversation, especially when you're learning or practicing, is fundamentally about connection, not perfection. Connection, not perfection. I love that. It just takes so much pressure off, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because you will make mistakes. You absolutely will. You'll fumble for words sometimes. You might use a filler phrase a bit awkwardly. You might forget to ask a follow-up question. That is completely okay. The goal isn't to sound like some flawless, grammatically perfect robot.
Right.
The real goal is to connect with another human being, to understand them, and to be understood by them, to share a moment, an idea, an experience.
So focus on making that connection. Focus on engaging with the other person, showing your genuine interest in what they have to say, and sharing your own thoughts and experiences in return, even if imperfectly. The fluency, the naturalness, the smoothness, all of that will develop over time with consistent practice. Don't let the fear of imperfection paralyze you or stop you from actually talking and connecting with people.
Just keep talking. Keep practicing these techniques, even if it's just one small thing at a time, and genuinely try to find the enjoyment in the process of connecting with people using English.
Find the fun in it. Experiment a little. Play with the language. See what works for you.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, here's that final provocative thought for you to carry forward, building on what we've explored. We spent a lot of time today exploring typical English conversational norms, the role of small talk, the style of storytelling, the importance of active listening cues, and the source hinted that these might differ quite a bit from your own cultural background. So thinking about your native conversational style, the way you naturally grew up interacting with people, can actually be just as insightful as learning the English style. What aspects of the English conversational approach we discussed today surprised you the most when you compare them to what feels natural or normal in your first language or culture? And considering those potential differences and all the specific techniques we've unpacked today, which single trick may be asking what to why questions or remembering to add extra detail to your answers or using a particular filler phrase like, well, actually, or consciously practicing an active listening cue like, or nodding, which one feels like the very first thing you want to actively try out in your next English conversation. Keep those questions in mind. And most importantly, keep those conversations flowing.
Absolutely. Until the next deep dive.